What if I told you that in 1966, two men climbed a hill in Brazil, put on lead masks, and died under circumstances so bizarre that investigators are still baffled today? What if I told you that next to their bodies was a cryptic note with instructions? So strange. It reads like something from a science fiction movie. And what if I told you that despite decades of investigation, multiple theories, and countless experts weighing in, we still have no idea what happened on that hill? Welcome to the Lead Masks case, Brazil's most enduring mystery, a puzzle that has captivated investigators, conspiracy theorists, and the curious for over half a century. Please tell us where you are from and what time it is when you see this video. I'm about to take you on a journey through one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in South American history. Two electronics technicians, a hill in Niterói, lead masks, and a death that defies explanation. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this case has become legendary, and why after all these years, it continues to haunt everyone who encounters it. But first, let me paint you a picture of Brazil in 1966. The country was in the grip of a military dictatorship that had seized power just 2 years earlier. It was an era of censorship, surveillance, and suspicion, where unusual activities could draw unwanted government attention. The space race was in full swing, with both the United States and Soviet Union pushing the boundaries of human knowledge about the cosmos. UFO sightings were reported regularly around the world, and Brazil was no exception. It was against this backdrop of political tension and cosmic curiosity that our story begins. August 17, 1966, started like any other day in the coastal city of Niterói, just across Guanabara Bay from Rio de Janeiro. But by evening, it would become a date forever etched in the annals of unexplained mysteries. Our protagonists were two men, Manuel Pereira da Cruz, 32 years old, and Miguel Jose Viana, 34. Both were electronics technicians, skilled in their trade and well-respected in their community. They weren't thrill seekers or adventurers. They were ordinary working men with families and responsibilities. On that August morning, the two friends told their families they were going to São Paulo to buy equipment for their electronics business. They mentioned they might also purchase a car, nothing unusual or alarming about such a trip. But they never made it to São Paulo, and they certainly never bought any equipment or car. Instead, their journey would end on a hill called Morro do Ventum, in circumstances that would baffle investigators for decades to come. The first sign that something was wrong came when the two men failed to return home as expected. Their families waited anxiously as hours turned into days with no word from Manuel and Miguel. In 1966, communication wasn't as instant as it is today, so delays weren't immediately alarming. But as time passed, concern grew. It wasn't until August 20th, 3 days after they had left home, that the horrible discovery was made. A young boy was flying a kite on Morro do Ventum when he spotted something unusual among the tall grass and shrubs. At first glance, it might have looked like discarded mannequins, or perhaps people taking a nap in an odd location. But as the boy got closer, the reality became clear and terrifying. Two men lay side by side on their backs, perfectly positioned as if they had carefully arranged themselves before lying down. They were dressed in formal suits, complete with ties and dress shirts, as if they had been attending an important business meeting. But it was what covered their faces that made this discovery truly extraordinary. Each man wore a crude mask made of lead, with eye holes cut out, covering their faces like something from a disturbing ritual. The boy, understandably frightened, ran to alert the authorities. When police arrived at the scene, they found a tableau that defied easy explanation. The two bodies were positioned with almost mathematical precision, lying parallel to each other with their arms at their sides. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of violence, no indication that they had been moved or positioned by someone else. It appeared as though they had climbed this hill, put on these masks, laid down in this exact formation, and simply died. But the mystery deepened when investigators found a small piece of paper tucked away near the bodies. Written in Portuguese, the note contained instructions that seemed to come from another world entirely. The note read, 1630, be at the specified place. 1830, ingest capsules. After the effect protect metals, await signal mask. This cryptic message would become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in Brazilian criminal history. What did it mean? Who wrote it? What were these capsules? What signal were they waiting for? The note suggested a level of planning and coordination that transformed this from a simple case of two unfortunate deaths into something far more complex and mysterious. The initial police investigation began immediately, but it would soon become clear that this was unlike any case the authorities had ever encountered. The first challenge was determining how the two men had died. There were no obvious wounds, no signs of trauma, no evidence of poisoning that could be detected with the forensic technology available in 1966. The autopsies, conducted by the local coroner, proved frustratingly inconclusive. The bodies showed no clear cause of death, no foreign substances indetectable. Quantities, no indication of how two apparently healthy men had simply stopped living. This lack of a clear cause of death would become one of the case's most enduring mysteries. In modern forensic science, we have tools and techniques that might have provided answers, but in 1966, investigators were working with limited resources and technology. The lead masks themselves presented another puzzle. They appeared to have been hastily constructed, cut from sheets of lead with rough eye holes that would have severely limited vision. Why lead? Lead is heavy, uncomfortable, and difficult to work with. It's also known for its properties as a radiation shield, which would later fuel some of the more exotic theories about what had happened on that hill. The formal attire was equally puzzling. Both men were dressed as if for an important occasion, their clothes clean and properly arranged even in death. This wasn't the clothing you'd expect for a hike up a hill, or for any kind of outdoor activity. It suggested that whatever they were doing, they considered it significant enough to dress formally. As news of the discovery spread, it captured the imagination of the Brazilian public. Newspapers ran sensational headlines about the lead mask mystery, and theories began to proliferate. Some suggested it was a suicide pact with ritualistic elements. Others proposed that the men had been murdered and the scene staged to look like something else entirely. But perhaps the most intriguing theories involved UFOs and extraterrestrial contact. The 1960s were a time of intense interest in the possibility of life beyond Earth. The space race had captured global attention, and UFO sightings were regularly reported in newspapers and on television. In this context, the strange circumstances of the lead masks case seemed to some like evidence of something otherworldly. The lead masks, some theorized, were meant to protect the men from harmful radiation emitted by alien spacecraft. The formal attire suggested they were preparing for an important meeting, perhaps first contact with beings from another world. The cryptic note, with its references to capsules and signals, read like instructions for some kind of cosmic rendezvous. While these theories might sound far-fetched today, they weren't entirely without precedent in the Brazil of 1966. The country had experienced a number of high-profile UFO sightings in the years leading up to the lead masks case. In 1957, less than a decade earlier, the town of Ubatuba had been the site of what some claimed was a UFO crash, complete with alleged debris that was analyzed by scientists. Brazilian newspapers regularly reported on flying saucer sightings, and the public was primed to consider extraterrestrial explanations for unusual events. But investigators needed more than theories. They needed evidence. The police began the painstaking work of retracing the final days of Manuel Pereira, Da Cruz, and Miguel Jose Viana. What they discovered was a timeline that raised more questions than it answered. On the morning of August 17th, the two men had indeed left their homes, telling their families about the planned trip to São Paulo. They were seen boarding a bus, but instead of heading to São Paulo, they traveled to Niterói. Witnesses reported seeing them in the city that afternoon, purchasing the lead, sheets that would later become their mysterious masks. They were also seen buying raincoats, despite the fact that no rain was forecast, and the weather was clear. The men appeared calm and purposeful in their activities, showing no signs of distress or coercion. They seemed to be following a plan, though what that plan was remained a mystery. In the early evening, they were seen heading toward Morro do Ventum, the hill, where their bodies would later be discovered. After that, there were no more confirmed sightings of them alive. The investigation revealed that both men had been involved in electronics and had shown interest in what might be called fringe scientific subjects. They had been known to discuss theories about space travel, UFOs, and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Some friends and family members described them as curious about the unknown, always ready to explore new ideas and possibilities. This personality profile seemed to fit with the theory that they might have been attempting some kind of experiment or trying to make contact with something beyond conventional understanding. But what kind of experiment requires lead masks and formal attire on a hillside? As the investigation continued, more details emerged that only deepened the mystery. The location where the bodies were found was not random. Morro do Ventum was known locally as a place where strange things sometimes happened. There had been previous reports of unusual lights in the sky above the hill, and some locals considered it a place of spiritual significance. Whether the two men chose this location because of its reputation, or whether they had some other reason remains unknown. The positioning of the bodies continued to puzzle investigators. The precision with which they were arranged suggested either careful planning or the involvement of someone else in their final moments. Yet there was no evidence of a third party at the scene, no footprints or signs that anyone else had been present. The rain that had fallen between their death and discovery had washed away many potential clues, but it seemed unlikely that such clear positioning could have been accidental. One of the most intriguing aspects of the case was the apparent timing. According to the cryptic note, something was supposed to happen at 16:30 and again at 18:30. If these times referred to the day the men died, it suggested a schedule that they were trying to follow. But a schedule for what? And set by whom? The mention of capsules in the note led investigators to consider the possibility that the men had ingested some kind of drug or poison. However, the autopsy results showed no clear evidence of poisoning, at least. Nothing that could be detected with the forensic methods available at the time. This doesn't definitively rule out the possibility that they consumed something that caused their deaths, only that if they did, it wasn't identified. Modern forensic science might have been able to detect substances that were invisible to 1960s investigators, but we'll never know for certain. The reference to protect metals in the note added another layer of mystery. Lead is indeed used as protection against radiation, particularly in medical and scientific applications. This led some to theorize that the men believed they would be exposed to some form of radiation and were trying to protect themselves. But radiation from what source? And why only protect their faces? If they were genuinely concerned about radiation exposure, wouldn't they have needed more comprehensive protection? The final phrase in the note, "await signal mask," was perhaps the most cryptic of all. It suggested that they were waiting for some kind of signal while wearing their masks. But what signal? From whom? And what were they supposed to do when they received it? These questions would plague investigators and fuel speculation for decades to come. As weeks turned into months, the police investigation began to stall. Despite extensive efforts, including interviews with friends, family members, and business associates, investigators could find no clear motive for suicide, no evidence of murder, and no explanation for the bizarre circumstances. The case gradually moved from active investigation to cold case status, though it never truly disappeared from public consciousness. Over the years, new theories would emerge, each attempting to make sense of the inexplicable. Some focused on the technical backgrounds of the two men, suggesting that their knowledge of electronics might have led them into some kind of dangerous experiment. In the 1960s, amateur radio enthusiasts and electronics hobbyists sometimes engaged in activities that were poorly understood and potentially hazardous. Could the men have been attempting to build some kind of communication device? Were they trying to contact someone or something using their technical skills? Other theories focused on the possibility of involvement with organized crime or espionage. The 1960s were a time of political upheaval in Brazil, and the military government was known to be suspicious of unusual activities. Some speculated that the men might have been involved in activities that attracted the attention of dangerous people, leading to their deaths, and the staging of the scene to hide the true circumstances. However, there was never any evidence to support these theories, and both men appeared to have lived ordinary, law-abiding lives. Perhaps the most persistent theory involved the possibility that the lead masks case was connected to a broader pattern of similar incidents. Researchers began to look for other cases involving unusual deaths, mysterious circumstances, and possible UFO connections. What they found was intriguing, if not entirely conclusive. There were indeed other cases in Brazil and elsewhere that shared some similarities with the lead masks incident. Reports of people found dead in strange circumstances after claiming to have been contacted by extraterrestrial beings. Stories of individuals who had been involved in UFO research or who had reported sightings before their mysterious deaths. While none of these cases were identical to the lead masks case, the patterns were suggestive enough to keep the extraterrestrial theory alive. One particularly intriguing connection involved a UFO sighting that had been reported in the Niterói area just days before the bodies were discovered. Several witnesses claimed to have seen strange lights moving in formation over Guanabara Bay, not far from where the two men would later be found. The timing was striking, but without more concrete evidence, it remained just another piece of the puzzle rather than a definitive answer. As the years passed, the case attracted the attention of researchers, journalists, and curious individuals from around the world. Books were written, documentaries were made, and theories were debated in academic circles and popular media alike. Each new investigation brought fresh perspectives, but rarely provided definitive answers. The case had all the elements that make for an enduring mystery. Ordinary people, in extraordinary circumstances, physical evidence that defied easy explanation, and questions that seemed to have no satisfying answers. In the 1980s, nearly 2 decades after the original incident, new information emerged that added another dimension to the case. Family members and friends of the deceased men began to speak more openly about the victims' interests and activities in the months leading up to their deaths. It was revealed that both Manuel and Miguel had been involved with a group of people interested in spiritual and paranormal phenomena. They had attended meetings where discussions focused on topics like astral, projection, communication with spirits, and the possibility of contact with extraterrestrial beings. This group, which operated in the Rio de Janeiro area, was said to include people from various backgrounds who shared an interest in exploring the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. Some members claimed to have psychic abilities. Others were interested in the scientific aspects of paranormal phenomena. The revelation that the two men had been involved with such a group provided a new context for understanding their final actions. Perhaps they weren't simply victims of circumstances or the target of criminal activity. Maybe they were participants in some kind of experiment or ritual that went tragically wrong. This theory suggested that the lead masks, the formal attire, and the cryptic note were all part of a planned activity. The group might have believed that certain preparations were necessary for achieving contact with otherworldly beings or for protecting themselves during such an encounter. The lead masks could have been seen as protection, not just from radiation, but from harmful spiritual or psychic forces. The formal attire might have been considered appropriate dress for meeting beings from another realm. The note could have been instructions received through psychic communication or developed through group discussions about proper procedures. While this theory provided a more coherent narrative than random crime or simple suicide, it still left many questions unanswered. If this was a group activity, where were the other participants? Why were only 2 men found on the hill? If it was an experiment, what exactly were they trying to achieve? And why did it result in their deaths? The spiritual group theory also raised questions about the role of suggestion and group psychology in unusual behavior. Could the 2 men have been influenced by group dynamics to participate in an activity that they might not have considered on their own? Were they perhaps more susceptible to unusual ideas because of their involvement with like-minded individuals? These questions touched on broader issues about how beliefs and social pressure can influence human behavior in unexpected ways. As the investigation into the spiritual group connection continued, researchers discovered that similar groups were operating throughout Brazil and other parts of South America during the 1960s. The era was marked by a general fascination with the unknown, and many people were drawn to groups that promised insights into hidden aspects of reality. Some of these groups were relatively harmless, focusing on meditation, philosophical discussions, and personal development. Others were more extreme, involving practices that could be psychologically or physically dangerous. Without more specific information about the group that Manuel and Miguel were involved with, it was impossible to determine exactly what kind of activities they might have been engaged in. The 1990s brought new technological capabilities to the investigation of cold cases, and the lead masks case was among those that received renewed attention. Advanced forensic techniques, better understanding of toxicology, and improved investigative methods offered the possibility of fresh insights. However, by this time, many of the original witnesses had died, physical evidence had deteriorated, and memories had faded. The passage of time, while allowing for new perspectives, had also erased many potential sources of information. Investigators attempted to re-examine the physical evidence that still existed, including the lead masks and clothing. Modern analysis could potentially reveal details that had been missed in the original investigation. Trace evidence, fingerprints, or other clues might still be recoverable with advanced techniques. Unfortunately, the results of these re-examinations were largely disappointing. The passage of time and the handling of evidence over the decades had compromised much of what might have been useful. While some new details emerged, they weren't significant enough to fundamentally change the understanding of what had happened. One area where modern investigation did provide some insights was in the analysis of the note found with the bodies. Handwriting analysis, paper composition studies, and ink analysis could potentially provide clues about who wrote the note and when. The results suggested that the note had been written by one of the deceased men, probably Miguel Jose Viana, based on comparison with known samples of his handwriting. This finding was significant because it indicated that the instructions weren't imposed from outside or were part of the men's own planning. It suggested that whatever happened on that hill was something they had chosen to participate in, rather than something that had been forced upon them. The paper and ink analysis revealed that the note had been written shortly before the men's deaths, probably within a day or two of the incident. This timing was consistent with the theory that they had been following a planned schedule, possibly coordinating their activities with some anticipated event. As the investigation continued into the new millennium, researchers began to apply modern psychological and sociological insights to the case. Understanding of group dynamics, cult behavior, and the psychology of belief had advanced significantly since the 1960s. These new perspectives offered potential explanations for how two seemingly rational men might have ended up in such bizarre circumstances. The phenomenon of shared delusions, where groups of people become convinced of beliefs that seem irrational to outsiders, was better understood. Cases like Jonestown and Heaven's Gate had demonstrated how ordinary people could be led to extreme actions through psychological manipulation and group pressure. While there was no evidence that the lead mask's case involved a cult or deliberate manipulation, the psychological mechanisms might have been similar. If Manuel and Miguel were part of a group that believed in the possibility of extraterrestrial contact or spiritual transformation, they might have been willing to take risks that would seem unreasonable to others. The formal planning evident in their actions suggested that this wasn't a sudden decision, but something they had thought about and prepared for. The psychological analysis also considered the possibility that the two men had been affected by some form of mental illness or psychological disturbance. Shared psychotic episodes, while rare, do occur, particularly among people who are close and share similar stressors or beliefs. Could the two friends have developed delusional beliefs that led them to their final actions? While this theory couldn't be definitively proven or disproven, it offered another possible explanation for their behavior. The challenge with psychological explanations was that they were largely speculative, without detailed information about the men's mental states in the weeks and leagues and months before their deaths. It was impossible to determine whether psychological factors had played a role. Family members and friends interviewed decades later generally described both men as stable, rational individuals who showed no signs of mental illness or unusual behavior. However, people can hide psychological distress, and the stigma associated with mental illness in the 1960s might have prevented others from recognizing or reporting concerning signs. One aspect of the case that continued to intrigue investigators was the precision and apparent planning involved. The men had acquired specific materials, traveled to a particular location, and followed what appeared to be a detailed schedule. This level of organization suggested that whatever they were doing was important to them and had been carefully thought out. It also implied that they expected to survive the experience. Otherwise, why would such detailed planning be necessary? The formal attire supported this interpretation, as people don't typically dress up for suicide or other self-destructive activities. Instead, they seemed to be preparing for an event they considered significant and potentially positive. This perspective led some researchers to focus on what might have gone wrong with their plans rather than assuming that death was the intended outcome. Perhaps they were indeed trying to make contact with something or someone, and the attempt resulted in their accidental deaths. Maybe they ingested substances they believed would enhance their ability to communicate or perceive, but these substances proved fatal. The reference to capsules in the note supported this possibility, though no conclusive evidence of drug use was ever found. Another theory that gained attention in recent decades involved the possibility of carbon monoxide poisoning. While the original autopsy didn't detect carbon monoxide, the testing methods available in 1966 were less sensitive than modern techniques. Carbon monoxide poisoning can occur in outdoor environments under certain conditions, particularly in areas with underground gas seepage or industrial activity. The symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, including confusion, disorientation, and eventual death, might explain how two seemingly rational men ended up in such strange circumstances. If they were affected by carbon monoxide, it could have impaired their judgment and led them to make decisions that would normally seem irrational. However, this theory had its limitations. There was no known source of carbon monoxide in the area where the bodies were found, and the symptoms typically associated with such poisoning didn't fully match the evidence. The men appeared to have been functioning normally until very close to the time of their deaths, which would be unusual for carbon monoxide exposure. As technology continued to advance, new possibilities for investigation emerged. Ground-penetrating radar, advanced chemical analysis, and other modern techniques offered potential ways to uncover evidence that had been missed in earlier investigations. Some researchers proposed returning to the site where the bodies were found to conduct more thorough searches. Perhaps there were buried objects, traces of unusual substances, or other physical evidence that could provide new insights. However, the location had changed significantly over the decades since 1966. Urban development, natural erosion, and countless visitors to the site had probably eliminated most traces of what might once have been there. Still, the possibility remained that something significant might be discovered with modern investigative techniques. The case also attracted attention from researchers interested in the broader phenomenon of unexplained deaths and mysterious circumstances. Comparative studies with similar cases from around the world revealed some interesting patterns, though no definitive connections. There were other instances of people found dead in strange circumstances, sometimes with unusual objects or clothing, sometimes with cryptic notes or messages. While each case was unique, the similarities suggested that the lead mask's case wasn't entirely unprecedented. Whether these similarities indicated common underlying causes or were simply coincidental remained a matter of debate. The internet age brought new dimensions to the investigation and discussion of the case. Online forums, social media, and digital archives made it easier for researchers and curious individuals to share information and theories. Previously obscure details about the case became more widely available and new. Generations discovered the mystery for the first time. This increased attention led to both benefits and challenges. On one hand, more people were thinking about the case and potentially contributing new insights or information. On the other hand, the proliferation of theories and speculation sometimes made it harder to distinguish between reliable information and unfounded claims. The digital age also brought new tools for analysis and investigation. computer modeling, statistical analysis, and database searches could potentially reveal patterns or connections that had been missed in earlier, more limited investigations. Some researchers began using these tools to analyze the timing, location, and circumstances of the lead masks case in relation to other events that might be connected. While these efforts produced interesting correlations and hypotheses, they generally failed to provide the definitive answers that everyone was seeking. One particularly intriguing development was the emergence of claimed witness, accounts that hadn't been reported during the original investigation. Decades after the fact, some individuals came forward with stories about having seen unusual lights, strange people, or other anomalous events in the area around the time of the deaths. While these accounts were interesting, their reliability was questionable given the long time that had passed and the potential for memory distortion or fabrication. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable, even under the best circumstances, and memories of events from decades past are particularly suspect. Still, some of these accounts provided details that seemed to corroborate certain theories about what might have happened. Reports of unusual activity in the area, strange visitors asking questions, or other anomalous events painted a picture of something significant occurring beyond just the deaths of two men. Whether these reports represented genuine memories of real events or were the product of suggestion and wishful thinking remained unclear. As we moved into the 21st century, the lead masks case had achieved a kind of legendary status in Brazilian culture and beyond. It had become a touchstone for discussions about unexplained phenomena, government cover-ups, and the possibility of extraterrestrial contact. The case was featured in countless books, documentaries, and television programs, each offering its own perspective on what might have happened. This cultural prominence ensured that new generations would continue to encounter the story and perhaps contribute fresh insights to its resolution. However, the passage of time also meant that primary sources were becoming increasingly scarce. The original investigators had died, witnesses had passed away, and physical evidence had deteriorated. Each year that passed without resolution made it less likely that definitive answers would ever be found. Despite these challenges, interest in the case remained strong. The combination of mystery, tragedy, and the possibility of extraordinary explanations continued to capture imaginations and fuel speculation. New theories emerged regularly, each attempting to make sense of the evidence in novel ways. Some focused on environmental factors that might have been present at the location, including natural gas emissions, electromagnetic anomalies, or other phenomena that could have affected human behavior or health. Others explored the possibility that the men had been involved in early experiments with psychedelic drugs, which were becoming more widely known and used in the 1960s. The counterculture movement of that era had introduced many people to substances like LSD, psilocybin, and other consciousness-altering compounds. Perhaps Manuel and Miguel had obtained some of these substances and used them in an attempt to achieve altered states of consciousness or spiritual experiences. This theory could explain both their unusual behavior and their deaths, as inexperienced users of powerful psychedelics can make fatal mistakes. The formal attire and ritualistic elements might have been part of their attempt to create the proper setting for what they believe would be a transcendent experience. However, like many other theories about the case, this one lacked concrete evidence. No traces of psychedelic substances were found in the autopsies, though again, the testing methods of 1966 might not have been sensitive enough to detect all possibilities. The technological advancement theory gained renewed attention as researchers learned more about the men's backgrounds in electronics. In the 1960s, electronics was a rapidly evolving field, and amateur experimenters sometimes worked with dangerous materials and high-voltage equipment. Could the two men have been conducting some kind of experiment that involved radiation, electrical fields, or other potentially hazardous phenomena? The lead masks might have been their attempt to protect themselves from radiation they expected to encounter during their experiment. This theory suggested that they might have been trying to build or test some kind of device, possibly related to their interest in UFOs and extraterrestrial communication. Amateur radio enthusiasts in that era sometimes attempted to build powerful transmitters or receivers, and such equipment could indeed produce dangerous levels of radiation. If they had succeeded in creating such a device and activated it on the Hill, it might have produced fatal levels of exposure despite their improvised protection. The cryptic note could have been instructions for operating their equipment, with the timing references indicating when to activate different components. While this theory was more technically plausible than some others, it still faced significant challenges. No evidence of any such device was found at the scene, and it would have been difficult for two men to transport complex equipment up the hill without being noticed. Additionally, their families and friends reported no knowledge of any such experiments or equipment. As the case entered its fifth decade without resolution, some researchers began to focus more on what the case revealed about human nature and the power of mystery itself. The lead mask's case had become a kind of Rorschach test with different people, seeing in it confirmation of their existing beliefs about the world. Those inclined toward conspiracy theories saw evidence of government cover-ups or secret experiments. UFO believers found confirmation of extraterrestrial contact and alien intervention. Skeptics pointed to the lack of concrete evidence as proof that the case was probably much more mundane than it appeared. This diversity of interpretations highlighted how ambiguous evidence can be, shaped by pre-existing beliefs and expectations. The case also demonstrated the human tendency to prefer complex, exciting explanations over simple, boring ones. Even when straightforward explanations were available, many people gravitated toward the more exotic possibilities. This psychological aspect of the case was perhaps as interesting as the mystery itself. Why do some mysteries capture the public imagination while others fade into obscurity? What elements make a case like this so compelling that it continues to generate interest decades after the fact? The lead mask's case seemed to have several key ingredients that contributed to its enduring appeal. First, it involved ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, making it relatable, while remaining mysterious. Second, it occurred at a time and place that was ripe for exotic explanations during the space age in a country with a strong tradition of spiritual and supernatural beliefs. Third, it left just enough evidence to fuel speculation without providing enough to reach definitive conclusions. Finally, it touched on themes that resonate with deep human concerns about mortality, the unknown, and our place in the universe. Recent advances in forensic science have led some to call for yet another examination of the available evidence. DNA analysis, which wasn't available in 1966, might be able to provide new information about the men's final hours. Advanced toxicology testing could potentially detect substances that were missed in the original autopsies. Chemical analysis of the lead masks and other materials might reveal details about their preparation and origin. However, the practicality of such re-examination is questionable. Much of the original evidence has been lost, contaminated, or degraded over the decades. The chain of custody for remaining materials may not meet modern standards for forensic analysis. Even if new tests were possible, they might not provide the clear answers that everyone hopes for. The case has also inspired various artistic and creative works over the years. Writers, filmmakers, and artists have used the Lead Masks case as inspiration for fiction, documentaries, and other creative projects. These works have helped keep the case in public consciousness, while also sometimes blurring the line between fact and fiction. Some creative interpretations have proposed solutions to the mystery that, while not supported by evidence, provide emotionally satisfying narratives. These fictional solutions often say more about their creators and audiences than about the actual case, but they contribute to the ongoing cultural significance of the mystery. In recent years, some investigators have attempted to use modern geographic and meteorological data to better understand the conditions present on the day the men died. Weather patterns, atmospheric conditions, and other environmental factors might have played a role in what happened. For example, unusual atmospheric conditions could potentially affect radio waves, electromagnetic fields, or other phenomena that the men might have been trying to observe or interact with. While these environmental studies have provided interesting context, they haven't led to breakthrough insights about the case. The complexity of atmospheric and environmental interactions makes it difficult to draw specific conclusions about their role in historical events. One area that has received increasing attention is the possibility that the case was connected to Cold War-era activities. The 1960s were a time of intense international tension, espionage, and secret government programs. Both the United States and Soviet Union were conducting various covert operations around the world, and Brazil's strategic location made it of interest to both superpowers. Could the two men have somehow become involved in intelligence activities, either as participants or unwitting subjects? This theory suggests that their deaths might have been the result of a failed operation, an experiment gone wrong, or elimination by foreign agents. The formal attire and apparent planning could be explained as operational security, measures or requirements imposed by their handlers. However, like many other theories about the case, this one lacks concrete evidence. There are no documents, witness accounts, or other materials that definitively link the men to any intelligence activities. Their backgrounds and known activities don't suggest involvement with espionage or covert operations. Still, the secretive nature of intelligence work means that such connections might not be obvious or easily discoverable. The psychological profiles of both men have been analyzed extensively over the years, looking for clues about their motivations and mental states. Friends and family consistently described them as rational, responsible individuals who showed no signs of mental illness or suicidal tendencies. They were successful in their work, had good relationships with their families, and seemed to be looking forward to future plans and projects. This psychological profile makes theories involving suicide or self-destructive behavior less convincing. It also suggests that if they participated voluntarily in whatever led to their deaths, they believed it would be beneficial, or at least safe. The trust they apparently had in their plan, or in whoever might have given them. Instructions indicates that they didn't perceive significant danger. This aspect of the case points toward either accidental death during a plan, activity, or deception by someone who convinced them to participate in something dangerous. Modern criminal profiling techniques have been applied to the case, attempting to understand the personality and motivations of whoever might have been responsible if the deaths were not accidental. These analyses suggest that if there was a perpetrator, they would likely have been someone the victims trusted, someone with knowledge of their interests and beliefs. The elaborate nature of the scene and the apparent cooperation of the victims indicate a high level of manipulation and planning. However, profiling techniques are most effective when there is clear evidence of a criminal activity, which remains absent in this case. The international attention the case has received over the decades has led to comparisons with similar mysteries from other countries and cultures. Researchers have identified cases from around the world involving unexplained deaths, strange circumstances, and possible connections to UFO phenomena or supernatural beliefs. While these comparative studies haven't solved the lead mask's case, they have provided context for understanding how such mysteries develop and persist. They also highlight the universal human fascination with the unknown and the known tendency to seek extraordinary explanations for unusual events. The role of media coverage in shaping public perception of the case has been significant from the beginning. The initial newspaper reports emphasized the most sensational aspects of the discovery, setting the tone for decades of speculation and theory-making. Later coverage often focused on the most exotic theories while giving less attention to more mundane possibilities. This media treatment has contributed to the case's legendary status, but may have also made it harder to approach the mystery objectively. The influence of popular culture on the case extends beyond simple reporting to include the way mysteries are typically portrayed in books, movies, and television. These cultural products have created expectations about how real mysteries should unfold and be resolved. When actual cases don't conform to these narrative expectations, it can create frustration and lead to the creation of more satisfying fictional explanations. The lead mask's case has benefited from and been constrained by these cultural influences throughout its history. Educational institutions have occasionally used the case as a teaching tool for courses in criminology, forensic science, and critical thinking. It provides an excellent example of how evidence can be interpreted in multiple ways and how assumptions and biases can influence investigation and analysis. Students studying the case learn about the importance of maintaining objectivity, the limitations of forensic science, and the challenges of investigating complex cases with limited evidence. These educational applications ensure that new generations of professionals and researchers continue to encounter the case and potentially contribute new perspectives. The digital preservation of information about the case has become increasingly important as original documents and evidence age and deteriorate. Efforts to digitize photographs, documents, and other materials help ensure that future researchers will have access to the basic facts of the case. However, digital preservation also presents challenges, as information can be altered, manipulated, or taken out of context more easily than physical documents. The reliability and authenticity of digital sources about the case require careful verification and cross-referencing. Recent developments in artificial intelligence and machine learning have opened new possibilities for analyzing cold cases like the lead mask's mystery. AI systems can potentially identify patterns in large amounts of data that human investigators might miss. They can also model different scenarios and calculate probabilities for various explanations based on available evidence. While these technologies haven't yet been applied comprehensively to the lead mask's case, they represent promising tools for future investigation efforts. The global nature of modern communication has allowed researchers from different countries and cultures to collaborate on the case in ways that weren't possible in earlier decades. Online forums and digital collaboration tools enable people with different expertise and perspectives to share information and ideas. This international collaboration has led to new insights and approaches that might not have emerged from purely local investigation efforts. However, it has also contributed to the proliferation of theories and speculation, making it sometimes difficult to distinguish between serious research and idle speculation. The case continues to evolve as new technologies, perspectives, and information become available. Each generation of researchers brings different tools and viewpoints to the mystery, ensuring that it remains dynamic rather than static. While definitive answers may never be found, the ongoing investigation and discussion contribute to our understanding of how mysteries develop, persist, and influence culture. The lead masks case has also become a case study in the sociology of belief and the psychology of mystery. Researchers have studied how different groups interpret the evidence and why. Certain explanations appeal to some people, while others find them unconvincing. These studies reveal important insights about human cognition, social influence, and the role of uncertainty in human experience. The case demonstrates how the same set of facts can support multiple interpretations and how personal beliefs and experiences shape our understanding of full, ambiguous events. As we approach the 60th anniversary of the lead masks case, it's worth reflecting on what we have learned and what remains unknown. The basic facts of the case are well established. 2 men died under mysterious circumstances on a hill in Brazil in 1966. They were wearing lead masks and formal clothing, and a cryptic note was found with their bodies. Beyond these facts, almost everything else remains a matter of speculation and theory. The cause of their deaths was never definitively determined. Their motivations remain unclear, and the meaning of their final actions continues to be debated. This enduring uncertainty is both frustrating and fascinating, representing one of those rare cases where reality seems stranger than fiction. The case has taught us about the limitations of forensic science, particularly as it existed in the 1960s. It has shown how cultural context and timing can influence the interpretation of evidence and the development of theories. It has demonstrated the power of mystery to capture human imagination and generate sustained interest across generations. Perhaps most importantly, it has illustrated how ordinary people can become part of extraordinary stories that outlive them and influence countless others. The investigation of the lead masks case has also contributed to advances in forensic science, criminal investigation, and the study of unexplained phenomena. Techniques developed or refined while studying this case have been applied to other mysteries and investigations. The interdisciplinary approach required to analyze such a complex case has fostered collaboration between different fields of expertise. In this way, the case has had positive impacts beyond simply satisfying curiosity about what happened to 2 men on a hill. The cultural impact of the lead masks case extends far beyond Brazil's borders. It has become part of the global catalog of unsolved mysteries referenced in discussions about UFOs, government conspiracies, and unexplained phenomena. The case appears in books, documentaries, and websites dedicated to mysterious events from around the world. This international recognition has helped preserve the story and ensure that it continues to be investigated and discussed. The emotional impact of the case on the families of Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana cannot be overlooked. For decades, they have lived with uncertainty about what happened to their loved ones and why. The ongoing speculation and theories, while fascinating to outsiders, represent a continuing source of pain and confusion for those who knew the men personally. Their perspectives and memories provide important context for understanding the case and remind us that behind every mystery are real people whose lives have been affected. As we consider the future of the lead masks case, several possibilities present themselves. New evidence might someday emerge that provides definitive answers to the questions that have puzzled investigators for decades. Advances in forensic science might make it possible to re-examine existing evidence with greater precision and accuracy. Witness accounts or documents that have remained hidden might come to light, and provide crucial missing pieces of the puzzle. Alternatively, the case might gradually fade from public consciousness as other mysteries capture attention and resources. The passage of time makes resolution increasingly unlikely as witnesses die and evidence deteriorates further. However, the enduring fascination with the case suggests that it will continue to attract interest and investigation for years to come. The most likely scenario is that the lead mask's case will remain unsolved, but continue to evolve as new perspectives and technologies are applied to it. Each generation of investigators will bring fresh approaches and insights, ensuring that the case remains dynamic and relevant. The mystery will continue to serve as a lens through which we examine human nature, the limits of knowledge, and our relationship with the unknown. In conclusion, the lead mask's case represents one of those rare mysteries that combines genuine puzzlement with broader cultural significance. It challenges our assumptions about rational behavior, the reliability of evidence, and the possibility of finding definitive answers to complex questions. The case reminds us that despite our advanced technology and sophisticated investigative techniques, some aspects of human experience remain beyond our understanding. It demonstrates the power of mystery to transcend time and culture, continuing to fascinate and perplex people decades after the original events. Whether the two men were victims of an experiment gone wrong, participants in a spiritual ritual, or something else entirely, their story has become larger than themselves. They have become symbols of humanity's eternal encounter with the unknown and our persistent desire to understand the inexplicable. The lead mask's case stands as a testament to the complexity of human motivation and the limitations of our ability to reconstruct past events. It serves as a humbling reminder that not all questions have answers, and not all mysteries can be solved. Yet it also celebrates the human spirit of inquiry and our unwillingness to accept easy explanations when the evidence suggests something more complex is at work. As long as there are people who value truth over comfort and mystery over certainty, cases like this will continue to capture our imagination and drive our search for understanding. The lead mask's case may never be solved, but it will continue to teach us about ourselves, our world, and the enduring power of the unknown. In the end, perhaps the greatest mystery is not what happened to Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana on that hill in 1966. Perhaps the greatest mystery is why their story continues to resonate so powerfully with people around the world decades after their deaths. What does our fascination with this case say about us as human beings? What does it reveal about our fears, our hopes, and our deepest questions about existence? These may be the most important questions the lead mask's case asks us to consider, and they may be the ones most worth exploring as we continue to grapple with this enduring mystery. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of Brazil's most perplexing, unsolved cases. The lead mask's case continues to challenge investigators, inspire theories, and capture imaginations more than half a century after it began. Whether you believe the answer lies in extraterrestrial contact, spiritual experimentation, criminal activity, or something else entirely, the case serves as a powerful reminder of how much we still don't know about our world and ourselves. If you found this exploration fascinating, consider diving deeper into the case through the many books, documentaries, and research papers that have been produced over the decades. And remember, somewhere out there, the truth about what happened on that hill in 1966 may still be waiting to be discovered. Until then, the lead mask's case remains one of the world's most compelling, unsolved mysteries, a puzzle that continues to challenge our understanding and ignite our curiosity. The story of two men, two masks, and one unforgettable mystery that refuses to be forgotten.